Okay, here they are. Great. So for the purposes of everybody in the chat, we'll just give you a couple of minutes to get in the session. And again, my name is Clayton Wood. I'm excited to co-host the Advanced SEO Summit with Neil Patel. Neil is going to be with us tomorrow afternoon doing a double keynote speech. He's going to be talking about demystifying SEO, and then he's also going to get into a step-by-step guide for how he sets up all of his SEO projects on his website, neilpatel.com. But before we get to tomorrow's, Thursday, that's happening on Thursday, I'm sorry. We're 4 days of the summit, and today is day number 2, and we are live with Tony Tai, the guy that runs SEO for Expedia. You may have heard of this brand before. Tony's a great guy and a good friend of Neil's that they've worked together on a number of projects. Tony, we thought would be interesting to have with us because he runs SEO for such a huge brand, and it would be interesting to hear the insight on what factors go into how he thinks about changing things and link building and on page. So we reached out to Tony and started talking to him, and he talks so much about the on page and said that this would probably be a point of interest a little bit more than link building because Expedia is so big that they get so many natural links on their own. So I thought it would be interesting for everybody to hear about micro iterations in a big brand. So think about how you look at the title tag, the URL, some of the tiny things. If you've got a small business, you may not think that those affect the search results too much, but if you were Expedia or a huge website, I'm sure you could understand that a lot of those micro iterations could change things. So welcome to the session. We've got an hour here. Tony's going to talk for about 30 minutes, share his slide deck, and then you can ask him anything that you'd like. Put your questions in the chat, in the question and answer section right below the live stream, and I'll come back when Tony's done and ask those questions. So Tony, we've got a little bit of Q&A, but first, thanks for coming, man. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Clayton. I'm doing well.
Awesome, that's great. So Tony, if you're ready, we'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into doing SEO for Expedia, and then if you'll just share with us all the knowledge that you have or what you can share, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So I got into SEO roughly around 2010, I believe, 2010, 2011. And I pretty much started by experimenting with a bunch of niche sites and stuff. Next thing you know, I've been working with a bunch of agencies on the agency side. I eventually led an SEO department for an agency and worked with a couple of big brands such as Johnson & Johnson, Hyundai, Coke, amongst many. And then after that, I've pretty much worked with every single vertical with regards to online marketing, with the ironic exception of travel. So I decided to go client side and worked with Expedia. I actually have to pretty much challenge to hit my numbers with regards to growth. So it's really different. Expedia is an online business as opposed to your brick and mortar store. So their needs are a little bit different. So it's been a fantastic challenge. I really loved it working there. And today we're going to be talking mostly about qualifying growth and how we do it, or at least how I do it. So should I jump right into it? Okay, well, I guess I will. Hello, everybody. So please forgive me if there are any hiccups because I was having some technical issues a little bit earlier today. So let me try to switch this and go to, I believe here. Okay, I'm trying to go to the chat box. So let me first ask the question, how many of you, this is not working out really well. How many of you, I assume there's a lot of you, ooh, look at this.
Tony, just ask live and I'll tell you what their answers are verbally.
Okay, cool. I'll just switch back here. So how many of you currently like run an agency or an in-house? Probably a lot of you, I assume, right? You see a lot of yeses?
Yes, so let's give them a minute to respond. But the question is, how many people are running an agency of any size, or how many people are working for themselves? Let's see. Aaron says yes. So I'm assuming that means yep, agency. Dylan says yes. Mike says yes. Jimmy says yes. Yeah, a lot of agencies here of different sizes.
Okay.
That's right.
Cool. Very, very cool. Cool. So with that being said, this might be a little bit interesting to you because some of the test methodologies that I implement might be something that can be useful for a lot of people, especially when you're talking about running large e-commerce sites. So second question is, how many people work on large e-commerce sites, or at least some kind of e-commerce site currently? Say, what size amount of traffic?
Let's see. So how many people work on large e-commerce sites? So Chris says, I do. Kev says, Sol. Let's give him a couple of seconds to respond here. Small business owner, I hear. Ethan says, nope. Aaron says, yes, that's us, e-commerce. Drew says e-commerce. Chris says he needs help with e-commerce. Dan says yes, yes, lots of yeses.
Okay, cool. So this would definitely be really interesting because what we're trying to do is we're trying to put some science behind SEO. So trying to qualify the growth. So so I talk a lot about on-site changes for SEO, and the fortunate thing with regards to being a big company such as Expedia, or whether you're working for an Amazon or whatever, is that there's not much focus on what people would call link building or acquiring links. I mean, that stuff happens naturally, and that's the way things should be with regards to Google's guidelines. So long as your product's good and your website's good, you're going to be gathering links over time. And there definitely is a correlation, depending on who you talk to in the community, where when you grow your site organically with regards to brand presence or stuff being pretty good out there, your links will grow. And at that point, any on-site changes, sorry, I almost sneeze right there. Well, it's quite pulverizing. So I have these two pictures right here, one being a small boat, which is pretty much reliant on the wind to push it, whereas there's a boat on the left, which would be pulverizing, as in any small change in the steering will pretty much be an unstoppable force. So on-site changes can pretty well, any small shifts in an on-site on the direction of your site can make a big difference. So experiments are a really good way to clear the waters, in other words. So when you do experiments for your on-page on your e-commerce sites, you do a couple of things. So first, you want to align SEO. SEO is generally a marketing channel. So Google's organic. You want to align that as a marketing channel so that it is just as at least seemingly as nimble as your other paid DR channels. So whether it be SEM or PPC or your paid Facebook or even your organic Facebook or what have you, those things can change on a weekly basis. If you can align all your marketing channels in some sort of way where the cadence is more parallel, that's doing SEO experiments are a good way to see that whatever you're doing this week can have an effect next week, and on and on and on. These are based on micro iterations. It also, if you're working within an organization or if you're working for yourself, it can prove the cause and effect of any type of on-site changes. So organic is typically a slow burning process, but that's because it's in a sea of a lot of informations and clicks. But if you can start isolating parts of your site, you'll be able to see those rippling effects that could actually add up to a lot. And all other stakeholders, whether they be in different silos, so your email marketing channels or in developers or UI or UX or anybody else touching the website, by having more of these tests that show in isolation what changes you're doing or having some sort of impact on your traffic or your transactions, that will allow everybody to be very aware of what they're doing, how that might have effect on SEO. So now they're starting to think about SEO because what they could do could potentially affect what's happening with regards to traffic or with regards to how this can affect the business overall. And people on the highest level will pay attention. So it's a good, so in effect, that actually makes everything more integrated, which is really what digital marketing should be anyway, right? We should stop talking about silos. So I'm talking to the agencies here. One of the frustrations when I was working at agency side is that everyone looked at marketing channels as silos, whereas when you're doing these micro tests and you're able to show that what other people are doing and also what you're doing can make some sort of effect on SEO, now people are starting to see things more holistically. So for example, if somebody wants to integrate some sort of new Java rendering on a page, as opposed to it being mostly markup, well, they'll do that. And within your SEO experiments, you can prove out the effects of that. Now, what you're doing is that you're getting everybody in the mindset that, oh, shoot, if I do this one thing, this could affect the other. And so we really want to get away from this where somebody would, we're talking about silos and stuff with regards to SEO. It'd be like, hey, Tony, can you just, do that SEO thing, just SEO this little thing after I've built up an entire site. Hey, I just built up all this stuff. Now just SEO it for me, please. I mean, it's quite annoying, right? SEO is pretty much something that you do that's baked into the entire process. So by doing experiments and proving out that when you pull one lever, it can affect the other, we want to help people, or especially our major stakeholders, or even if we run things ourselves, that we start thinking more holistically as opposed to more silos. So that's a good benefits of doing things and less of with experiments. So there are a couple of ways with regard to on-site experiments that we do. That I do. There's A/B split testing as well as pre and post. So I'll talk about the difference between the two. So we need to talk about metrics of success when we do some things on the site. Does our click-through rate improve? Do our rankings improve? And does our traffic improve? And all these things actually generally layer up or layer up to traffic anyway. So if our CTR does improve, so does our traffic. If our CTR improves, so do our rankings. And if our rankings improve, so does our traffic. But traffic ultimately is where we want to which is the metric for success. But however, sometimes because of seasonality, because of search demand, because of all these factors, you need to look at these in isolation. So if you're going to do a title tag test with some of your pages, in a sea of all these clicks, which some of it could be branded searches, some of them are not branded searches, some are due to seasonality, it's hard to see whether that title tag change actually improved your CTR or whether it improved rankings on certain pages, although rankings technically can be more easily tracked. But when you track certain keywords, then you miss out on all the long tail keywords that you're not tracking. But ultimately, it's all about traffic. So let's talk about A/B split testing. So the idea of A/B split testing is that you have two segments of pages. So you have an A, which is your control, and then you have your B, which is your enabled, or in other words, your test group. So what you want to do is you want to actually have a group of pages. So if you run an e-commerce site or even a large site with a lot of content, it doesn't necessarily need to be e-commerce. It could be just this large site, just this large context site like a Huffington Post or maybe even a Pinterest or something like that, where there's one segment of pages. So a large segment of like, say, 1,000 pages or 10,000 pages, really depends on what it is that you're looking at. And another segment of an equal amount of 10,000 pages or 1,000 pages or what have you. And on one side, so say that you have segment A, which is your control, there's not going to be any changes done. And then your next segment, which is segment B, there's going to be changes done. And so those changes, so what you want to do is that you want to change what's on segment B, your enabled group, to see if there's a difference and see if there's any type of improvement. So you're controlling your enabled. So usually you do your splits based on a couple of things, your traffic. So say for example, you are an e-commerce site and you're selling t-shirts. And typically when you're an e-commerce site, when you're selling t-shirts, you have you want to segment it based on the traffic of t-shirts. So say under the t-shirt segment, I want to test out how my yellow shirts are doing compared to my white shirts, and assume that I programmed it and engineered it where there is a type of page template to them, where the URL has some sort of like comprehensive architecture to that URL. What we could do is we can segment the two and take a look at both of them and say, okay, there's 100,000 clicks this month available between these two types of pages, so, or in total between these two types of pages. And of the 100,000 clicks, there's only say like 10,000 page that's split between 10,000 pages. And of those 10,000 pages, we could then decide how we want to split the traffic. So because you're basing it on traffic, segment A, which may be your control, could be 3,000 pages, and then segment B could be like 7,000 pages because it's proportionate to the traffic. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And other things you want to take a look at is based on seasonal trends. So you want to make sure that if you're going to be segmenting your pages, try to get them aligned seasonally. So if, for example, you're selling Christmas sweaters and then you're selling Halloween costumes, you don't want to A/B test them at the same time because you know the demand is completely different. So you want to take a look at your year-over-year traffic as well. And this also works for optimizing existing pages that are the core of your business. Now, UGC type pages, such as your core or your princess, might have a different approach of how they want to segment their pages because they're constantly creating new pages. But they may just randomly select certain pages. But the best way to do your control and your enable is to make sure that you're taking a look at a group that has reliably predictable traffic at a trend, like at a time of a year where the news isn't affecting the trend or seasonality doesn't affect the trend, then you could do your split that way. So you basically, it's based on URLs. So once you find your URLs, you then therefore would do the change on the enable and keep your control. And this is basically what it would look like. So say, for example, on day 11, say on day 8 or day 9, I do that change, whether it be a title tag, whether it be changing the UI or UX, you'll be able to see that change over time. Now, unfortunately, sometimes the data isn't entirely clean. It's kind of all over the place. And that's where it becomes not as compelling. And how do you show that what you're doing with regards to SEO, you're on site, whether it be user experience or what have you, or whether you're introducing more content, video, etc. How do we know that? How do we get more cleaner data out of that? But what we really want to do is we want to calculate that average. So this is a formula that Julie Ann actually created over at Pinterest, and actually I use something similar to this as well, but I've decided to adapt her calculations. It's the average difference. So what you have, so you ultimately have your enabled group and you have your controlled group, and what you do is that you get that difference. So how different is the enabled and control group? And what you do is you want to see. So basically, what you'll see, you want to see what that number is by measuring your enabled group and your control group pre the test. So before the test runs, what that number would look like, which is represented by this orange line. And then you want to see what that looks like after. And through this calculation, you'll be able to see that average difference. So this is what that difference between the enabled control group is. So that's represented by this orange line. And then you have the average of that difference, which is represented by this green line here. And then once your test rolls, you'll be able to see, just lost my mouse there. You'll be able to see what that looks like, again, represented by this orange line, which by itself is really hard to tell if there was an improvement, but because you've used the formula above, you'll be able to see what that average looks like. So you're going to see this step up in terms of an average. So the average difference between your controlled and your enabled group once a test has run for a few weeks or a few days, how does that average look afterwards? So this is a little bit of a more clear indicator of that. So there are a couple of ways how that data will be represented. So at the top is that would be considered a good test that you ran. So you did some sort of test with with your pages, and you see that average pretty much stay flatlined, and then it would just go up. So this is definitely a clear winner, and hooray, we did it. We calculated that gap between the two groups, and we want to pretty well ship this new change that we made to the on page between our test group A and test group B. However, you'll sometimes see the opposite, where whatever test you did, you'll see this decrease in traffic. So you see this like trend, and because you have this average that normalizes the number, you'll see it go down, and that's where you want to abort. and we want to revert that change. Now, the unfortunate thing is that if you're dealing with thousands and thousands of pages, that could take time, and it may or may not fully recover, but at least you'll be able to get some insights off that. So now this is really useful if you're working with an e-commerce site and you have your product team that is developing, say, some new pages, and say it's like a new feature. Say that you develop a calculator, and you think it's in like this nice cool widget, this nice cool tool that you could have as part of your e-commerce site, and they want to roll it out with every single page. So by doing these A/B tests, you'll be able to talk to your stakeholders and say, well, wait a minute, how about we roll it out on 50% of the pages, and the other 50% of the pages we don't roll it out, and we'll have this SEO test methodology running in the background to see if there's any impact on traffic. There are all these other metrics that they're probably looking at, like the product team may be thinking about, engagement rates and conversion rates and all these other things, but what's the impact on SEO? So by running these tests, you'll be able to talk to your other stakeholders and show them that this is what the impact of their non-SEO executions can have on us. Sometimes, unfortunately, a really cool tool that a product person has probably created on the site gets axed for reasons such as the below graph, which is unfortunate. It's this cool interactive tool, but it has negative effects on SEO, and then we just have to axe it. It's just not worth it. On the flip side, sometimes you'll see some improvements in rankings. So depends on your site. Pre-posts. Okay, so same methodology with regards to A/B testing, except you're rolling out at 100%. So what you do is you have your traffic, your absolute traffic. So you won't be subtracting your enabled and control, but at least you'll have your average of traffic, and then what that looked like afterwards. So what you want to do is you want to average out your traffic before the test, and then you average out your traffic after the test. So when do we use pre-post? So we use and when do we do A/B split tests? So pre-post actually happens more so than A/B split tests. And that's because when you do pre-post tests, there are more situations which allow for it. So if you're only testing out a few pages, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands, but say that you only have like 1 or 2 pages, pre-post makes sense, because say that you only have 2 pages, and you have another 2 pages, and the only thing you can A/B test is only like a total of 4 pages together to enable, to control. That won't give you very much information. So you might as well just roll it out completely and do pre-post, where you'll see what the change looked like before and what the change looked like after you've done your test. Web design refresh. I mean, this, for those who run agencies, one of the things that makes it pretty frustrating is when your client just refreshes the entire site. You have a brand team that just refreshes the entire site and it changes the entire site altogether, where it's infinite scroll page, like one of those one-pagers. Those can be pretty frustrating, not entirely SEO friendly. So that's where you're pretty well forced into seeing what the pre-post results were, which is what did your traffic look like before the site redesign, and what did the traffic look like after your site redesign. PPC influence and Google SERP updates. So as we know, Google semi-recently allowed it where there are 4 ad placements, and these are things we just can't control. So anything that Google does that displays on their SERPs, or say their SERPs updates, say they're doing something with their maps now, that's pushing down the organic, that pretty well forces the entire site to do analysis with traffic with pre-post. So you can't really do an A/B split test because Google's just forced you there. So pre-post actually happens quite often, but using the methodology that I talked about earlier, what we're going to do is we want to average out certain segments of pages. Then the more you segment these pages, the more you'll be able to have a better view of what ripple effect is, how many ripple effects there are in the sea of information, the sea of clicks that you're getting from search. A/B split test, you really want to consider doing that whenever and wherever you can, but that means that certain conditions have to be there. you have to have a lot of pages with a lot of traffic, because all these small micro iterations makes a huge difference, because you're funneling in tons of long tail traffic. Okay, so if you only have a few pages, or even if you have a lot of pages but it only has very little traffic, if you went from 2 clicks to 4 clicks between your A/B tests, that's not very significant. But if you're measuring hundreds of thousands or thousands of clicks versus another segment of thousands and thousands of clicks, and you see an improvement there, that's a lot more meaningful, because it means that you have more opportunity to funnel in more traffic with these micro iterations, like more long tail traffic. And that only happens when you have large volumes of traffic funneling into your site. And then segmental iterations too. When you do these A/B split tests with these pages, you do want to make these tests one thing at a time. If you do multiple things at a time on these pages, say for example, the product team's rolling something out, and then you're doing a title tag test, or you're doing a content refresh, and then somebody wants to, remove inventory or add inventory or etc. I mean, there's just so many things going on that it becomes hard to attribute any improvements or losses or whatever. But if you can have these iterations throughout the entire team segmented, that provides a better condition for your A/B split tests. So CTR experiments. So this is a popular one that some folks have asked me about. How do you test out if you're doing some title tag tests, your meta description tests? I mean, we do know that meta descriptions don't necessarily, at least it's stated, that doesn't necessarily improve SEO in a direct way, at least the way that a title tag would, but we want to know this in entice clicks. So when we think about it, and I'm sure everybody here knows how to use AdWords, or has at least experimented with it. The idea of AdWords is they reward ads based on user experience, and part of the user experience is the ad copy. So is the ad copy enticing the user to click on it? And then after they click on it, does the experience after they click on it, post-click, fulfill that promise? And Google does obviously reward you for that, at least in AdWords, for sure. So the idea is, does that also apply to SEO? And a lot of people have wrestled with trying to figure out how do I show that? How do I prove that out? So, so do your SERP tags make a difference? So in this case, I'm going to open up an Excel file that I kind of just created. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I just created this Excel file, made up stuff. And instead of putting on slides, I decided to just do an export and just make up a bunch of numbers, at least to show how I would prove out the CTR for any messaging. Like how do we get more traffic by making iterations on our title tags or meta descriptions to entice more clicks? So this would be an export from your Search Console, and I would do it based on keywords, then based on pages. And the reason why that is because when you do an export on pages or on keywords, you get, even though it says pages here, keywords, you get click information, you have impressions information, you get CTR, and you have the average position. Now, a page can funnel in a ton of keywords. And because that page can funnel in a ton of keywords, that generally affects your average position in a big way. So say that your average position of a specific URL is, I don't know, 7.3, and you click on that URL and you find out what all the queries are on that URL, and then you find out that 99% of your traffic is from this one keyword, which is ranking number 1, and you have all these other long tail keywords, which is ranked, position 9, 10, or whatever, and that's dragging down your average. So it's actually a little bit more accurate to take a look at it on a keyword level. So what you do, and this is an example, if say Google, this is an example. So pretend that Google rolls out a new SERP update. They just update their maps where they push down rankings altogether, or maybe they change something in SEM where CTR has improved for ads, and we want to see what the effect is on organic. And that's something that a lot of us struggle with. Every time Google makes an update with SEM ads or PPC ads or maps. We're trying to find out like what effect is that making on our keywords or on our pages or our organic altogether. And we generally don't know that much, right? I mean, maybe some of you see it, but generally speaking, there's a lot of people who don't know what type of impact there is because it's so slight. And that's because, as I mentioned before, these iterations, you're going to see some sort of impact, some sort of small drop of an impact in a sea of a lot of information, and it's kind of hard to see what that impact is. So this is how I do it. So what you do is that so I have the pre-tab, I do an export, and I decide that I want to see my information 12 days. Say I want to say 12 days before the change in Google's algorithm. I do an export, export all clicks, impressions, CTR, and positions. And what I would do is I would create a table which shows the rankings. So anything ranking number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So position 3, the total clicks is 3,000. So I add up all the clicks and ranking position 3, and I add up all the impressions position 3, and then I calculate my own CTR. And I do that with every single ranking position based on this export of keywords. And I do the same thing for post. So all the keywords, clicks, and then sum them all up. So position 3, that's a total number of clicks in position 3, number of impressions in position 3, and then I calculate my own CTR, which is divided by that. Once that's done, then you create a table, and with this table, we'll see that 12 days before and 12 days after. So we would layer, say, 12 days before and 12 days after, position 3 to 16. So post-click after an update, again, this is completely made up, by the way. Post-click after the update, it helped us. We just got more clicks. And before the update, we had less clicks. So position 3 had this many clicks, position 4 had this many clicks, position 5 had this many clicks. After the update, we got this many clicks, position 3 and position 4, etc. Impressions, same thing. Like we know that all keywords in position 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, these were the impressions before, and this is the impressions after the update. And then CTR. So anything ranked in position 3, anything ranked in position 4, 5, 6, 7, before the update, this was the CTR, represented by every single ranking position, and this was the CTR after the update. Again, these are completely made up numbers. One thing to consider when I was doing this, so I was just taking a look at my really old Search Console account that I fiddled around with, and this is why we're seeing like, you know, why is the number so big here and not in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I don't remember how I did this export, but I don't think I exported this excluding brand, so you might want to exclude brand. Anyways, these are like completely made up, but it gives you an idea. And the good thing about this, by understanding what that CTR is, or what the click is, or what the impression is, based on every single ranking position, is because it shows that if you make a title tag change or a meta description change, you'll be able to see, because one day you'll be ranking position 1, the next day you'll be ranking position 2, and the next day you'll be ranking position 3, or the next day or the next week you'll be ranking position 1 again. So if you're going to be seeing how that page performs in terms of total clicks pre or post the update, you're gonna have unclear data or unclear information of whether it was rankings that improved your clicking, your traffic, or was it your title tag test, or your meta description tests. But by measuring how the clicks are, or the click-through rate is, or the impression per ranking position, that gives you a better understanding of either how the update impacted your clicks, or how your iterations on the site have impacted your clicks. Does that make sense, Clayton? Does everybody Does everybody follow along with this? Okay. I'm going to assume that everybody understands. And then when we go to the question part, I'll be able to answer your questions in a little bit more detail. Okay, so that's where I open my Excel sheet. So some things to consider when you're doing your tests. You want to start, some things to consider, but not necessary, but definitely nice to have if you want to make it much more accurate, is you want to start measuring when the page is cached. So the moment the page is cached, that's probably the best time to start measuring the results, as opposed to just say, okay, our test began today because we did the update today, right? And if Google doesn't cache your pages, then how do you know that your changes have made any kind of impact? You also want to group your pages with similar metrics outside of just traffic, bounce rate, time on site. If the intent is, if the quality of traffic is quite similar, that we want to make sure that we have similar audiences as well. So this is a closer way to finding out that we have a similar audience, not just similar pages. And then we want to talk about statistical significance calculations, and there's a couple of calculations for that. One with the classic p-value and the chi-squared. So think about that as well. The downside for that is that if your pages don't have a lot of traffic, you'll be running that test for a very, very long time. But if you have a lot of traffic, then you can do that in a much shorter period of time. Okay, so final thoughts. You definitely want to go out, do some tests, test your pages out, test all your iterations to pretty much prove that whatever SEO executions that you're doing on site is having a business impact. And it's a good way to pretty much give yourself visibility to the rest of your stakeholders so that when they start making any changes, they have SEO in mind. It's a good way to bring science to SEO because SEO is a very data-driven type of marketing channel. So that's it. That's my presentation. Thank you very much. And then I guess I'll just pass it on back to Clayton.
Amazing. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Listen, everybody seemed like they were keeping up with some of the questions that you were asking about whether they understand the spreadsheet, all good stuff. We've got an advanced audience here that has done a lot of these tests and is really thankful and grateful that you're sharing some of this stuff. One thing that a lot of people ask for that I got to ask you right off the bat is if that spreadsheet was full of just dummy data, can you email it to me so I can send it out? They really want that spreadsheet just sort of built for them, if that's possible.
Yeah, for sure.
So after this call, guys, Tony's going to email me that Excel spreadsheet. If you want it, you can email me at clayton@neilpatel.com and I'll give it to you. But let's get started with some of the questions. The first one is upvoted the most. It's not specifically about what your presentation was about, but it's got so many upvotes that I'm going to ask it. It's about backlinks. And I know you've got experience with agencies and doing backlinks as well, so I think it's appropriate here. Phil's asking, what's the best way for an e-commerce site to get relevant quality backlinks? Guest blogging, etc. sometimes isn't an option for e-commerce sites. So any advice outside of the normal guest blog stuff?
I mean, I'm gonna I'll probably, and I appreciate the fact that a lot of people are asking about building backlinks and stuff. I'm going to reserve a discussion for backlinks possibly another time, only because I want to make sure we focus on technical SEO at this point. There's a lot of discussion whether it should be guest posting or what have you, but ultimately, I'd probably say.
Looks like Tony is reconnecting, guys. But give me a thumbs up in the chat, and I think he'll be right back because I know he's refreshing his browser or he just got disconnected. But if you can hear and see me, give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat, so I know that we're all still here. And when Tony gets back on, we will continue with the Q&A. 1 second here. Let me just see what happened to Tony. Okay, so you can hear me. Great. Good job. Let's give it a couple of minutes for Tony to get back online. I know he's in a hotel room, so sometimes the data and the internet connection isn't the best. Thanks, Michael. Hey, Michael Howard again. Cool. Also, just to remind you again, while we're waiting for Tony to come back, if you've got a question and you want to make sure that it gets answered, be sure and put that in the Q&A section right below this box. And then, if folks are upvoting it and we've got some time, then we will definitely make sure that it gets answered. I'm still just going to wait for a couple more minutes so that Tony can refresh his screen and hopefully come back on air with us. When we were in the green room before, he went off air a couple of times, but I'm glad he got to stay on air for the majority of it. Dylan, yeah, he did not want to, he was not going to answer that backlink question, that's for sure. But Tony, if you can see this, just type in the chat for us and we'll get to all of those answers. And if something doesn't, if he's not able to rejoin us, at least he was able to get to through his entire presentation. And I'll make sure that we get those questions answered directly to you, even if it's sending them to you via email. So I know that Tony is in a hotel room, so sometimes the internet isn't as reliable as it could be. And I see we've got a bunch of questions here, which I'd love to get the answers to. And it looks like, yeah, okay. So it looks like that he's trying to get back online. So if you don't mind hanging out, I'm just gonna hang out here for a couple of more minutes and see if Tony is able to get back online. Let me try and get him on Skype. Can you type in the chat box there, please? Can't see or hear live talk. All right. Okay, well, worst case scenario, guys, we've got another great presentation coming up after a short break. There he is. Tony's back. All right, let me invite him on screen, and let's get these questions answered. There's Tony. Okay, he should be accepting the screen invite here. There he is. Hey, man.
Hey, sorry about that. Don't know what happened there.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. Let's get to the next question. So Joao's asking, what are the most critical on-page factors that you focus on when creating blog posts?
Critical on-page factors. Ooh, okay. When creating blog posts on our site, I mean, like, this is going to sound like, again, I think it all comes, the devils come down to the details. So a lot of what I'm going to say is what everybody already knows, which is creating fantastic content, make sure that the bounce rate is as low as possible, making sure that it's fulfilling. I mean, and it just comes down to execution, blog post by blog posts, and the devils always come down to the details. So if you're writing a great piece of content and you see what the other people are writing, try to outclass them in any way possible. Try to outclass them with regards to not just text content, but even interactive content. And I've seen it many times, and I've proved it out many times, maybe not Expedia, but other sites, where we've dropped our CTR, we've dropped our bounce rate by half, and that has increased our organic traffic threefold, even though we had less written content. So it pretty much goes down to the fact that you just need really good content and try to outclass your competitors or what everybody else is writing. And that is ultimately really good for the internet too, because it means that there's not a lot of crap content out there. I could say crap here, right?
Yeah, you certainly can. Thanks for that answer. That's a good one. All right, so Chris asks, with 7 upvotes, he says, I'd like to know if having many products with no traffic hurts a website. Sites, let's say with 3,000 products, but maybe only 100 of those products get traffic. Is that bad?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, so long as you actually have these products, so make sure that they're not paid. I assume these are just products, not just empty pages you're creating, like multiple filters. Not necessarily. That could be based on a lot of things, and I assume this is organic traffic. So the only thing I could say is that if it's a net new product that nobody's ever heard of course, organic search traffic is going to be down. So that's why it's up to you to rely on your other marketing channels and to create this movement around that type of new innovative product, so that search volume could be could go up. If it's on the up, if the products that you have are on the upswing, it's good to position yourself to have these products available so that when search demand goes up, you'll be well positioned. But it really depends.
Awesome. And listen, for the audience members that if we don't have time to ask your question or to get it answered, email me at clayton@neilpatel.com. And anything that you need, I'll try and get it to you as much as I possibly can. We wouldn't be here without everybody in the audience. So thanks for joining us today. Let's move on to a question from Phil. Phil's asking, what are some common or most beneficial site changes to make when A/B testing?
Again, it's really, and sometimes it's fairly surprising and sometimes it's not, but I will, and I don't want to disappoint the audience so much with this answer. And it's going to be a general answer because what we know, what I know is generally what everybody else knows. So I'm not going to say that I'm necessarily the smartest SEO. I'm just going to say that it's always down to the execution. So how can you outclass your competitor? So do you have a better, are your competitors just keyword stuffing their title tags? And are our title tags reading more like natural language? So we're outclassing them so we get a better CTR. Is having too much content, like are we keyword stuffing our page? Does that ruin the experience? If so, and if we can test out that that's a better alternative, that's a good way. The idea is that always think about how you can outclass your competitors, and sometimes ends up being better. Sometimes keyword stuffing your page is not a good idea. Sometimes it is. I don't know. It's really up to you. But try to outclass it. And sometimes you're going to find, and I've often been surprised where I thought this wouldn't work and it ended up working. But what's always worked as a guiding principle is constantly trying to outclass your competitors from an experience side, because trying to anticipate, the rat race of trying to quote unquote, do like SEO things is not trying to, as a Wayne Gretzky quote goes, not trying to follow the puck, but trying to go where the puck is going. And as you know, Google is trying to provide the best answers for the users. And if you start thinking like that, trying to provide the best experience answers for the users, when you do your A/B tests, they're just going to be that much better. Yeah,
absolutely. Well said. Okay, so next question is from Shai. It's an interesting one about Expedia. Shai's asking, does a huge site like Expedia get most of its traffic from organic or direct traffic or from paid?
Most of the purchases are incurred by organic traffic. Unfortunately, I cannot comment on that. I cannot comment on that, unfortunately. Sorry, Shai.
Sorry, Shai. I'm guessing it probably comes from all channels all the time. Adrian is asking, what's one question that comes to mind that you wish people asked you more about SEO? Anything in particular that you think the community overlooks a lot of times?
Yeah, I mean, by doing more A/B split tests, without giving away too much of what I've done in the past or what I'm currently doing, what's consistently showed up is that a better user experience always gets more traffic. And not just better traffic in terms of more rankings of your tracked keywords, but more long tail keywords. You'll be fairly surprised. And I wish there were more tests out there that prove out that by improving your transactions or decreasing your bounce rate has improved your overall standing with Google. And I feel that there's not enough science behind that to just definitively prove it out. And it's out there. It definitely is. So I think doing that would be great. The thing where it really gets tricky is that it gets territorial with regards to if you have a team where it's like who takes care of product, who takes care of UX. If you're approaching it that you want to provide Google the best experience, you might step on some toes, and that's where it gets sometimes political. But if you can navigate through that and say that we're all in this together, it becomes pretty rewarding.
Awesome. Great answer. Okay, Abdel is asking, what are some pitfalls to avoid early on in SEO, and what should be phased out as you get bigger? Any shortcuts that you can save some of these newbies from wasting time on?
I mean, the good site architecture is the most important thing. I'd probably say starting off. It's actually quite crazy how often I see this where the site is built where they're not properly siloed. So proper site architecture will go a long way. Do that, and that will eliminate a lot of headache down the road, especially as you get bigger. Because as you get bigger, your engineering team becomes bigger, and then the environment starts to be sliced up, and then any type of changes that you want to create is like moving mountains. So good site architecture is pretty good.
Okay, cool. We've got a couple of more if you still have time.
Yep.
How do content locks on specific pages or an entire site affect your SEO effectiveness?
How do content locks on specific pages or entire site affects you? So what do you mean by content locks?
Yeah, I don't know. Jeff, hit us up again and we'll get that question re-asked, but we weren't quite sure if we understood you correctly. Let's see. Out of the last few that we've got, and I see Tyler's in the audience. Hey, Tyler, good to see you again. Let's take Kev's because that's a cool one. He's asking any alternatives to A/B tests for sites with less than 50,000 visitors per month.
See this is a winner. Yeah, at this. Well, I mean, it really depends, but I mean, I'd probably say at that stage, pre-post is your best approach. But if you're going to be doing pre-post, try to segment it as best as possible. So don't do pre-post. Try to segment it. When I say segment it as best as possible, where you're talking about like similar type pages or a certain type of page. So if you're selling a certain SKU, just pre-post only that SKU or those SKUs. Yeah, I would do that.
Okay. Cool. Dan wants to know how many hours a week you work.
Well, it's not about that. It's what the results I get. So I'll do whatever it takes in order to hit my numbers.
That's awesome. Okay. Let's see. If you have an e-commerce site with thousands of similar products where part number is only the differing value variable, how should you structure that without getting penalized from thin pages? Okay, so I hope you understand. He's just asking about a bunch of products on a bunch of pages and it's thin content. Any advice there?
With thin content?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you sell a ton of products and there's thin content, I mean, it's.
Do you go back and like spend a bunch of investment on adding a bunch of brand new content to it? How do you decide where to spend your time or money?
Right. So the idea of doing tests is that you want to throw away all your assumptions out the window. So maybe like thin content, the assumption is that it's not a good user experience, but not good user experience in comparison to what? So if you're comparing to Amazon and it has a lot of content, like what have you, and yours is thin, the assumption is that your experience is not that good. But you might want to test that out anyway, and then maybe do an iteration where you do add a lot of content on another segment, and then try that out to see if that helps it. One of the things is that, in my opinion, and I think a lot of SEOs have different opinions, even amongst other SEOs that I work with. In my opinion, I always think that the less friction you add to your page to the intent of the user, the better the experience and the better your SEO will become. So just adding a lot of like content for the sake of content may add friction. And if it's too much friction, that equals bounce, that equals less transactions, that equals less goodness for SEO. However, I've also seen it where that has been the opposite, where it's not actually added friction and it's only helped. So, I mean, again, I hate to give you a very, very general answer, but throw your assumptions out the window and just test. It's just, you want to outclass your competitors. And I'm going to keep harping on that. But that's really where it is. And you're just going to be surprised by your results.
Okay. And then last question, Aaron's asking, I'm curious how Tony would handle a duplicate content issue with an e-commerce site, and it might seem like it's duplicate content because it's similar descriptions to others. Is that sort of included in that last answer that you just gave?
So I'm curious how you would handle duplicate content issues with e-commerce sites that have products that is similar in description. Okay, so just content, like written content. I assume everything else is a little bit different. Yeah. I mean, that's, geez, it's going to have to be example by example. I mean, I assume one would probably be, say, if I was like selling skincare products, it'd be like skincare, it'd be like face cream, and the other would be face cream with sunscreen, I guess, right? And they're different.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, you know, like from a user standpoint, somebody's looking for a product with sunscreen, that's more likely going to funnel in that like somebody typing in that more longer tail keyword anyway. So I don't see that being an issue. It's not duplicate. If the product is different, then the page would have to be different. Naturally, it would have to be. It would have to be different in the title tag. If it's not, then you better change that. It's basic 101 SEO. Yeah, and even if it's not in your description, your copy, that it's any different, you probably should change it anyways for your users to know the difference in the product. So just by thinking about, I want to make this product better and sell this product better by providing a better presentation, your SEO is not going to be duplicate content anyway. So if you're going to have duplicate content issues, then it's probably because you know, potentially there's just not enough effort in terms of presenting your product better. You present your product better, that part will naturally take care of itself.
Got it. Okay, cool. That is actually all the time that we've got today. Tony, it was great having you, man, and great to meet you last night. Tell everybody how they can follow you or email you if they want to keep up with your SEO strategy.
Yeah, so I just I put up 2 sites. I put at epictony.com, and then I have
Tony?
Tony, so Epic Tony, Tony, so Epic, EPIC, Tony.com. I'm going to make that into something else, my own personal blog. I don't have a personal blog yet. It's just a funny site that I just put up. So I will be transforming that. But if you but you could just email me at hitonytie@gmail.com. So HITONYTIE@gmail.com.
Got it. I'm typing it in there. And thanks everybody for joining us. Tony, I hope you're enjoying the West Coast. We'd love to have you back here a little more often. And with that, I'll let you go for the day.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, brother. Okay, guys that are still in the audience, great to see you hanging in there through Tony's reconnection that we got there through the Q&A. And if you've got any questions about the All Access Pass, about what you get for it, email me at clayton@neilpatel.com. We've got one more amazing session coming up here. I just got word from Vasile that they are ready with Aaron Aguias, the co-founder and managing director at Louder Now. This next presentation and the one that concludes our regularly scheduled program is going to be about start small, play big, how to beat enterprise competitors with their own SEO tactics. So if you've got a site and you're trying to rank in a competitive SEO term, tune in right now. As soon as I get done and sign off, the audience will automatically go to that next session, and let's get ready to learn. Bye, guys.